Hi, I'm Molly.
And I'm Jamie, and this is our From the Pasture with Hired Hand podcast. As the owners of Hired Hand website software, we've been developing websites and creating internet marketing strategies for livestock breeders for the past 10 years.
The majority of our customers are involved in the breeding of registered animals, such as Texas Longhorns, Highland cattle, horses, and white-tailed deer, where the pedigrees are very important. The From the Pasture with Hired Hand podcast examines many of the differences in raising pedigreed livestock for maximum profit. Join us and learn what we're covering today.
Today I'm joined with Ross Zuber of Dauntless Longhorns in the Texas Hill Country. Ross, you have been breeding Longhorns since 1998, which is a long time in Longhorn history. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having us. This is neat.
So we're just going to go through and we're going to talk about your breeding program, learn a little bit more about the bloodlines you're focusing on, hear some stories from you. One thing I noticed when I looked at your website preparing for today is you have a saying on there, all we need now is green grass and time. Have you gotten either of those this year?
Well, we need another summer like 21. 22 and 23 in a lot of the country, but especially Texas, were brutal, really bad. Haze through the roof. Nobody, everybody's anxious because they don't know what this summer's going to bring. So I think people are kind of a little tentative with decisions on buying or selling or holding or, whatever. No, we have not had green. We've had plenty of time, but not green grass. That's for sure.
So 50-50.
Yeah. But the green grass is the more important part. So.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know. We have a family place in East Texas, and if it were not for the family place, I would have had to make some big decisions that I didn't really want to make last year because we got so dry in New Braunfels, San Marcos, all this hill country area that every time we would go for a visit, I would just take a load with me and 8, 10, 12, depending on how big the cows were or how big the horns were every trip, and got the majority of them over there. And we were better, but it didn't help as much as I had hoped.
One of those times, though, maybe it's kind of nice to have your pastures and your ranches spread out a little bit instead of all in one place, for sure.
Yeah, we did learn that because around here, everybody I know is in the same boat. And, it's different with beef cattle. I think unless you're working on bloodlines of beef cattle, you can just if they're just generic cows, you can take them to the sale barn, you can sell them. And then when things get better, go buy again. But when you've been working on specifics, people that are true breeders will understand what I'm talking about. You can't do that. You can't just, it would be a huge task to sell and start over with what you were working on. It just kind of a sticking point where you have to stick it out. And I called a guy about some hay the other day. I have some, but I just asked him how much it was. He said, well, I have some for $140 and some for $165 a bale. And I thought, as fast as my cows eat hay, that it would be insane. I wouldn't be able to do it. Wouldn't make any sense.
Well, you touched on a point that I think will be a good segue for us. So you mentioned that you can't just sell your herd and, then when times are good, start back at it. And so you've probably seen a lot of ups and downs and had to have a lot of patience and everything with having been in it since 98. Just talk me through, what that looks like for you and your program.
Well, early on in 98, I'd moved from Texas to Tennessee, and I had a little farm north of Nashville and 18 acres, beautiful little place. And, I needed cows. You don't have 18 acres that you mow like a yard. And I went into the newspaper, because that's what we used to do before online everything, Craigslist and Facebook and all this stuff. And I found 2 cow-calf pairs. Didn't know anything about bloodlines. I just wanted two pretty Longhorns. Went and looked at them. They were really nice, good shape, and I bought them. And answering your question, for the first many years, which I think a lot of people do the same thing, I just wanted pretty and cheap, which, a smarter person that studies it a little bit more, but the majority of people that I know that get into Longhorns just want pretty and cheap. Well, pretty and cheap, you might happen on something, but for the most part, you're probably going to sell off 80, 90% of what you start with once you figure out what you really want to do breeding wise. So those early years, the herd was beautiful. And I kind of I met Joe Grady, and he was a pretty big mentor to me and us. So I started studying pedigrees, and I met Todd Taylor. He was a big mentor, and he kind of showed me the rule that works. The dam line. Look at obviously the mother and her mother and her mother on down that diagonal, and the Hired Hand website's real good for that, by the way. And I started focusing on the improvement generation to generation on those existing dams in the dam line. And obviously you want the same thing out of the bull on that diagonal dam line. But I focus heavily on genetic improvement from generation to generation on the bottom diagonal dam line. I think Daryl Dickinson calls it genetic bounce or something like that. But Todd used some of his cows as an example and showed me in the pedigree, so like, for example, Delta Sissy looked like this and her daughter looked like this. And then it got a lot more fun because it wasn't just throwing darts at the wall and breeding to this bull and hoping for a great calf. When you start to pool, that's why it gets hard, because when you're new, you can buy anything. Anything works because you don't know what you're doing. You don't have any cows. You want some cows. But when you start following a bloodline or a few families, Mike Davis was impressive to me early on. He focused on Tejas star families through Texana Van Horn, Delta Van Horn, all that.
So back to those Todd Taylor genetics again.
Yeah, that's true. And the Cha-Ching family, and of course, Alan and Teresa Sparger, the best one, the Danica line. But if you look at his site, it's his entire herd. There's variation, and he's obviously had to make it his own and put things with it. But he's a real good example. I'm not a tight enough example of that yet. He's a real tight example of those three families. And then he's finding the bulls that work with those three families. And you can't create that overnight. The green grass and the time, what we're doing today, obviously it takes roughly 9 months to have a calf, and then roughly a year to know if it looks like anything. And let's say you stick with it 18 months, you breed her. You better have a plan, or you could be wasting a lot of time. If you choose to improve, you just want something pretty to look at. That's a different story.
So let's dissect a few of the things you mentioned. So when you first got started, it sounds like the pretty Longhorns that you needed for the 18 acres, you just strictly wanted some pasture art to help with grazing and maybe an egg exemption, that sort of stuff. Is that right?
Yeah. I had, I'm going to pull something up just so I can reference it. I had 18 acres, and yeah, I didn't even realize the ag exemption would have been important, but yeah, that was a big deal. I wanted something where I didn't have to mow the 18 acres and something pretty to look at, because it was a beautiful little place, log house, river, the whole deal. It was gorgeous. And Longhorns, they increase your property value. I don't know if you know that.
How so? Share that with us.
Your place will stand out from other places because of Longhorn cattle. I mean, I have people around here that'll want to sell their place and say, "Hey, can you come park a few cows on our place?" It improves curb appeal, and it really does.
Kind of that iconic Texas heritage that everyone wants.
Yep.
And then even more authentic in Tennessee, I would imagine.
Oh, big time. And you know, how many people retire and they've always wanted a ranch, but they've had a corporate job. They've lived in town. There are a lot of examples in the Longhorn world. They buy a ranch and what do they get? They don't get black cows.
Yeah.
I mean, we have black cows also, but they get Longhorns because of the romance.
So is that kind of what made you sway towards then wanting to learn the pedigrees and the breeding side and kind of make that switch from just pasture art and something to mow your acres to really getting involved heavily on the pedigree side?
Well, my grandparents had cattle and my mom and dad had a few, just a few. When I got those first two pairs, there was something about them. I knew that they were smarter. And of course, beef guys will never admit this, but those cows are brilliant. They are smart. When my cows know what I want them to do, go here through this gate, whatever. Once they know what I want them to do and you don't rush them and you don't confuse them you don't set them up for failure. A lot of times I'll get my cows to do things that my dad will look at me like, how did that just happen? They just did what we've been thinking. And I said, Dad, they're smart.
How did you segue from just having them for pasture art to, being involved in the pedigrees and the breeding?
Well, first of all, they were pretty to look at. And secondly, I noticed the intelligence of them. And since I only had 18 acres, it wasn't like it was going to be a big beef operation anyway. It wasn't about the money to me. It was more about the mental therapy of looking at them. I could sit in a lawn chair and pour a line of cubes on the ground, and who knows what that would cost me in some psychiatrist's office, So they were smarter. I just started to enjoy them. I started going to some shows, the Tennessee State Fair. I was talking to a buddy of mine, Mark Priest, the other day, who has a hired hand site as well, Leaky Trough Ranch. In the early days at the Tennessee State Fair, I met Scott Simmons and Ethan Luce and Carl Cressman and a few other people. And I just kind of got into the lifestyle and met Joe Grady at a sale. I wanted to buy a young bull that he sold, and I went down and I missed the bull. And he leaned over and said, "Don't worry about it. I got a bunch more back at the ranch better than that one."
Nice.
This is a killer story. This was in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Oh, God, a lot of years ago, 20-something years ago. He invites us to his place, and we had to leave Nashville after getting off work. So we didn't get there until 1 or 2 in the morning. And before cell phones, you couldn't call and say, "I'm running late," or text. He met us at the door. I'd never known him more than squatting down next to him in the aisle at the sale. And he said, "Y'all's bedroom is right there." And he pointed to the doorway. He said, "See you in the morning." Went in the bedroom, went to bed, woke up to the smell of bacon and eggs being cooked, and realized we were in his master bedroom. That guy, I'm going to tell you, I credit a lot of the Longhorn industry has fantastic people, but for that guy to do that to someone he didn't even know, I can't say I would do that.
That's awesome.
He gave us his master bedroom, cooked breakfast, and we were fast friends ever since. And I really started studying wiregrass genetics and what had worked for him. And of course, Todd Taylor as well at the same time. But those cows that I needed were out of my range price wise. They were expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And again, when you start, you want pretty and cheap. And sometimes cheap will do it, but a lot of times I wish I had done what some people had done from early on and had fewer of higher quality and then bred to the bull of the month or the bull of the quarter or whatever every year, even through AI without owning a bull. which some people do, and it works pretty well for them. So I guess that would be the way I started studying pedigrees and learning. But from those two guys mainly, and Ronnie and Stella Cruz also, they were heavy on the show side. Oh, those are another group that we met early on. But the horn breeders were Joe Grady and Todd Taylor, pretty much.
So talk to me about some of the maternal bloodlines once you started getting into pedigrees and really understanding that you kind of built yourself up to that were within your budget. And then also let's talk about how those bloodlines have got you to where you are today.
Okay. I started studying that improvement, that female improvement, the saying, if you have a bull and you want to see what his daughters look like, look at his mother. Well, I wish somebody had said that early on, and I wish I probably wouldn't have listened anyway. But kind of what really started clicking with me with Joe's bloodlines was Gunsmoke. And he had Wiregrass Guns a Smoking, Wiregrass Smoking 44. Wiregrass Guns a Smoking was a real pretty brindle bull. He came forward quite a bit, but the daughters were insane. So I started trying to incorporate that. And I'm not a big line breeder, but we found it in a few females, top and bottom, and started trying to pull those genetics in. I tried to get as much of Todd Taylor's stuff as we could, Tejas Star, Starliner Headliner and Starlight, made Starliner,
Mm-hmm.
and just started to mix them in, and every now and then would get distracted a little bit with something shiny and inexpensive, but we started focusing on that. And really, well, again, I'm going to polish your apple. Hired hand, when we got the website, the cross-referenceability of everybody's herd, where you could see your cow and her mother and all of the lineage beyond, it was a research tool for me. And looking at progeny, it's real simple. You say you look at a cow and you see her progeny, and you look at those progeny. One of the questions on your list was, how often do you look at websites? I don't want to answer that question because it's almost constant. When you lay in bed trying to go to sleep, when you shouldn't have something lit up in front of your face, I'm on my phone like tons of people I know looking at pedigrees, and it gets insane at some times because it's a little too much. You kind of have to turn it off some.
Mm-hmm.
But I just find myself studying, and Arrowhead Cattle Company is an excellent resource also. How hard is it when you go and look at the top females? Well, why don't we try to get some of that? I mean, and when you see top caliber over and over and over in 90-inch plus animals, and obviously the Loomis stuff, you can't deny that his animals are insane, and they always have been. And Dale Hunt's also. He was kind of a protege of Bob and took it his own way. And
Mm-hmm.
they're, I don't want to go visit either of their ranches because I'm afraid I'll want to make a bunch of beef and start over.
So who were some of your first few that you got really excited about, whether it was because they won shows or awards or sold well? Just who are some of those first few? Let's do females first. That really kind of put your program on the map for you. You feel like?
Okay. Well, I don't know if we're on the map, but that's nice to think of. Okay, let me change that. Obviously the big guys to me are the big guys. They're the ones that we're always aspiring to be. But then occasionally you'll go somewhere to a sale or a whatever, and you'll see someone and they'll say something, well, breeders like y'all. And I want to look over my shoulder to see who they're talking about. And it really makes you feel good when you work hard, because I'll tell you, I live, eat, and breathe it. Probably a little too much. I think sometimes it's my job to do it, but it's not. It's a really enjoyable second occupation. The cows, I'm not answering your question. They would be fairly recent because I lived in Tennessee for 25 years and moved back to Texas in 2014. And I kind of let my addiction fly when I got back. I just took off. And so a cow named Sunny, a top caliber daughter, is our cow. She's the number 2 total horn cow alive. I love that cow. I let her in the yard sometimes. I just love looking at her. And of course, Maxine, which is the dam of Sweet Maxie that Cold Copper owns. Darren and Dawn Davinia bred Maxine. I love that line because they really don't miss. You know, the ones that there's too much time involved and too much expense to not have your genetics pointed in one direction unless you're just doing it for fun. And I'm doing it for fun, but it's a competition to me. I want to have that herd that, well, Diva and I both, we want to have a respectable herd. You know, one of those 2 cows we originally bought, the cow calf pairs, I was looking at the pedigree of a calf I've got out of ironically, the sire of the calf is Tejas Hard Rock, which is a Todd Taylor bred bull. But the dam side, that diagonal, this heifer is named Dauntless Don't Make a Scene. Her dam is Dauntless Spectacle, which is a Samchek's daughter. Her dam is Dauntless Splendora, which is an SHR Dauntless daughter, Doug and Sandy Stotts, who are no longer in it. Her dam is RJ Stormy May. That was the calf inside a cow. I bred this mating, but I sold her mother to a guy. So she was born. It was our breeding, but she was born to him. So RJ is the name. But that animal's dam is Charasa Sweet Girl, which was the calf inside of my Amex 679 cow. That was one of my 2 original pairs. So when I can, and Hired Hand, the site lets me see that. Even though I know that in my head, I can't see it until I look at it. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 generations of females on there that are breeding that we planned. And of course, a lot of guys, they have that in spades. You know, Tom Smith, widespread, of course, Dale, you know, a lot of the bigger guys that have been doing it longer, they can have the whole pedigree, their animals. But when I can look at that and go, okay, this is fun. We still have a lineage of the original cow. That's kind of cool.
That's very neat. Are there any bulls like that you've put out over the years that you're proud of?
Well, we've got a bull prospect right now named Dauntless Hammered. Ironically, he is a son of Dauntless John Mayer, which is out of Wiregrass Mercedes, which is one of those Joe Grady cows that I really keyed in on. And then on the bottom side, the dam is Dauntless Lillehammer, which is a Samchek's daughter out of Wiregrass Lily May. And that's that double bred Guns of Smoking that I was talking about. So, I mean, he's our breeding as we planned it, but you got to be pretty far down the road to really call it your breeding. A lot of people will take a first generation calf and say, oh, this is our breeding. Well, yeah, technically, but, you know, takes a little while to get there. Samchek's was huge for us. I remember studying progeny from him, and he only had a few. He only had 40 registered sons and daughters, and 27 of those registered animals were daughters. And I knew where 9 of them were, and they were off the charts. And I thought, okay, I got to get this bull. And he was kind of the, I think you asked earlier what he was a definite pivotal point for us.
And how long did you have him?
Good Lord. 7-8 years.
I feel like that's also maybe like around that same timing when you really started to ramp up your advertising and your new look and just really kind of push those sorts of things as well to be more known in the industry.
Yeah. And we started going to the horn measuring competitions, and Sam won his class several years. And one year won Bull Alley. I think it was 2018. I don't want to say it wrong because if it wasn't 2018, whoever won it will get mad. It was well, it's on the front page. And we took the guitar home for the most semen. He sold like 81 straws of semen at that thing. Of course, that didn't compete much with MC Hangin' Tough this year, 600 straws.
That event's come a little bit too since then. So
yes. Yeah, he was 2018 Bull Alley champion. Yeah, we did start up in advertising, and yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think of that.
So I don't know if I've ever asked you this, even though I know when we started working on your ads and your website and stuff, I was always curious. Where did you come up with your ranch name, and what's the story behind it?
That word has always impressed me. I love the word dauntless. I love what it means. And the funny thing is, a lot of people don't know what it means. Like I'll say the name Dauntless Longhorns, and I have to spell it for them. I'm thinking, you don't know that word, but they don't. In fact, that bull that I said, SHR Dauntless, I found a calf with Doug and Sandy Stotts. I found it about 4 or 5 days after it was born on their site, hired hand site, and it had 6 80-inch progeny in its immediate pedigree. And at the time, there were only a couple people that had that because I did a bunch of studying on it. Ron and Barbara Marquez had something with 6. And they had him named SHR something. And, he wasn't officially registered yet. So I asked him, can you change it to SHR Dauntless? And they said, sure. And they did. And they registered him SHR Dauntless. And that was kind of where we carried that word forward. I knew that's what we wanted to be called. And that kind of started it.
Does your brand tie into it? I forget. I can't picture your brand. Okay.
No, the brand was real lazy, I got to admit. That's a funny story too. All these people work so hard on a brand, and they can get real elaborate, and elaborate brands just don't work. You're asking for trouble, hot spots, and maybe even eventually brand cancer or whatever. But I wanted a unity symbol, like 2 rings together. And I spent all this time making it. I cut some small pieces of pipe. I cut a notch out of each of them. I configured it and, put the arms on. I weld and do all that stuff anyway. And I get it made, and it was a hot iron brand, and I used it. And I was a little frustrated because I probably had 10 or 12 hours time in actually making it and remaking it. And my numbers were electric. And my brand that I'd spent all that time making looked exactly like a sideways 8. So needless to say, I was not happy. So I just started using the sideways 8 because it's the same thing. Of course, some people will say it looks like an infinity thing or a whatever. That's a story behind that. No, it does not tie into the name, but it's a.
Did you at least keep the brand that you built and have it on display somewhere?
Sure, yeah. I've got way too much time in that. It just hangs by the fireplace.
Love what you're hearing? Be sure to check out our Pickup Truck Confessions. It's a video series where we hop in the truck or rental car and interview a variety of breeders about what drives their passion for their livestock, how they got started in the breed of their choice, marketing tips, and more. And now, back to the podcast.
You've talked a lot about bloodlines, and you've mentioned some of the really, outstanding breeders that you had the pleasure of, I feel like, picking their brains early on. What would your if you had to describe that your, ideal, iconic Longhorn cow, how would you describe it? What's her horn set? What's her coloring? What's her body?
Good Lord. It used to be a Stockton Burton cow. Oh my gosh. When you've got all these names, it's hard to remember. That it was years ago. If I had time to look, I'd look it up and tell you. It was a Stockton Burton cow. But I love twist horn. It just, the fluidity of the just a nice sloping. It's romantic. It to me, it's kind of the symbol for the Longhorn. Obviously, I like a real nice high horn cow too, but we have a few of those. But the twist, I looked at the herd a few times in the past and I went, wow, I wonder if we like twists, because everything almost was twisty. I don't know, Molly. That's tough.
What about coloring? So you have twisty horn. What color do you pair it with?
Okay. Now color is a funny topic. I always say if you don't work at it, you'll end up with white, red and white, and white and red. It's real easy to get, and it's real hard to not get. You got to focus on those pedigrees, but as well, not a solid white bull. I come on, like a bull like Drag Iron, tricolor, brindle, speckled, doesn't get any prettier than that. But, back in the day, it was hard to get brindle. And it's easy to get now, but people have worked on it. Brindle is one of my favorites, but maybe not. Samcheks with solid brindle, but with a little odd patching if you really study them. Someone will put, on Facebook or somewhere, oh, look at this colorful calf. And Devo will walk by and say, that's not a colorful calf. It's heavily patterned. So you've got to be truly colorful to pass her color test. I like the stuff that's hard to get. We have a PCC front runner daughter named Dauntless Biscuit Runner. Kind of a stupid name, but she was biscuit colored when she was born, and it just kind of stuck. That was her nickname. But she's a dun brindle, and that's insane rare. Those are the ones, if you took it to a sale, she would kill it. But those are also the ones you want to keep and try to make things out of. I don't know.
No, that's a great answer.
Solid black is hard to get. A good black and white's hard to get. I like anything that's hard to get, that takes work, pedigree wise or color wise, body conformation. She may kill me for mentioning her. Kathy Palladini has on her site, Double K, they've got an interesting palette. She has some killer colors. Just what I want to be when I grow up, color wise.
She also does a great job of photographing them, so they look even better.
Yes, she does. The background doesn't hurt either. And something that's interesting is she puts that blue band around the picture, so anywhere in the pedigrees, where that animal came from if you pay attention to that kind of thing. Like myself.
Well, where do you think your program will be 5 years from now? Talk us through some of your goals and strategies you have coming up.
Well, this is the most exciting time for me breeding wise. It started about a year ago, maybe a little longer. And I can't tell it right now because I'm not far enough along, but we're working on some cool stuff. We've got some bulls. We've got a Silent Iron son, Silent Plan. We've got a Richard Carroll bred bull, RZ Shaka Joe. We've got finally a Mike Davis bred Century son. And ironically, his mother was out. His mother's mother, was a full sibling, or is a full sibling to our Sunny cow. So we're able to incorporate our beloved Sunny genetics with a Danica son. You see what I mean? It's just trying to put these pieces together, and we're mixing, and we're making daughters out of this one with our cow genetics, and hopefully breeding those daughters to either of the other two bulls for different reasons. And sooner or later, they're all going to be in one pedigree.
Is it hard to be patient?
That's exciting to me.
Is it hard to be patient?
Oh, God. Oh, man. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, first of all, if it's a pasture breeding, you don't even know you're getting a female. So we've started to do a little IVF work and embryo transfer stuff, and you have a little more control over it then. Well, you have a lot of control because you have a specific cow, specific bull, a heifer, and then we've even done that for bulls too. To try to get a bull out of a certain mating, but you've got to make multiples, because if you make one, you just use the one because he's the only one you have. But what if he's no good? And even those great pedigrees don't always click. So you want to make 3 or 4 or 5, and the time, it's just insane. If I just turned 54. I'm not going to see this until probably a couple more years to actually see it on the ground. But man, is it exciting.
What do you feel like is good advice for new breeders that you haven't shared through your stories with me yet?
You were talking about earlier, there's an evolution of information in everything. The fact that we can have a website now, we can study it. Okay, I'll make an analogy. When I was a kid, I played a little bit of guitar. The only way you learned is from your buddies, or you took lessons. Kids now, if they want to learn something, they go on YouTube or go on whatever. There's a lot of information available, and newer breeders can be, and a lot of them are better from the start because of the information available. Now, I'm going to use specific examples. My buddy Mark Priest, Ryan Schmidt, Rocky Meadow Longhorns. The cows, and I don't want to say newer, but we've been in it longer than he has. He's been in it a short amount of time, and he's got an insane herd. Mark has a great herd for the amount of time and the number of animals. So they have it easier. If you want to be a real breeder, study what the real breeders do. It's kind of a simple concept, but a lot of people, especially men, they don't listen. I want to do it my way. And I think that's been a little bit of a detriment to us. We haven't jumped on the bull of the quarter bandwagon, and I probably should have a few times, at least a little bit, because if you make all the animals, if you set up all the matings for my own desires and things I like, well, I have to run into people that like that as well. And what if I can't find those people? But if you breed to some top bull right now, well, let's use MC Hanging Tough. If you breed to him with a nice cow, obviously it has to have a nice calf. There's value there. That's obvious. There's market value. I always say, let's do a few for us and a few for them. But you have to learn, and it takes time to learn what it is you like, because you don't know I'm going to speak for me. I didn't know what I wanted. I just knew what I thought was pretty. And as in a lot of things, pretty doesn't always cut it.
Yeah, that's great advice.
I learn of, Ryan Ritchie also has a hired hand site, Ritchie Land and Cattle. All of us are constantly looking at animals, and they'll send a screenshot of some animal they saw and then you go, wow, look at the sire of this cow. I've never seen this bull. Well, we'll search that. And, it's neat. A lot of people would say someone with 6 cows didn't need a website, but they do, because it's a tool that shows some sense of professionalism that I'm actually trying to do something here. It's not the cheap way out, but if you really want to build something, you can see it that way. The new guys have websites. They have they do Instagram and, everything. I don't know. A lot of the new guys are doing it well, really well.
Yeah, having the technology, continue to progress and be there definitely changes the game, and the amount of time, as you mentioned, that you have to wait to see your plan or your work goes a little faster these days, I feel like.
And when you get an embryo placed and then you got your fingers crossed that it sticks, and when you find out it sticks, you see that date on the ear tag of when it's going to be born, and you're going, man. You find out at about 8 months due, and it gets here before you know it. But it's that oak tree adage: when's the best time to plant an oak tree? 30 years ago or right now? And you just gotta get to work if you're actually working on something, or it ain't going to happen.
Well, as long as we're talking about technology, let's go over some of our website related questions. So I won't even ask you how much time you spend per week, because I feel like you've covered that. You're not wanting to answer that one. Do you happen to remember the past 3 Longhorns you looked at in your search history? Are you willing to share those with me?
Well, I go back and check Mike Davis's site quite a bit to see what Century's doing. Buddy's sites, Ryan Schmitz and Mark Priest's, Rocky Meadow Longhorns and Leaky Trough. I'm on John Helm's site quite a bit. Dale's a lot of them. But I saw one the other day that I'd never heard of. This will be a plug for these folks, and I was really impressed. They're in Kentucky. I can't remember the name. They're in the logging business. It's something Longhorns in timber. Do you know
we have a couple with, was it Sutton by
chance? I can even picture it. It's yellow. The background at the heading is yellow with a saw blade.
Does Sutton sound familiar? Okay. Might have been their site. I think they're in Kentucky.
Yes. Yeah. Here's a great example. Mark found a heifer, and it led us to look at their bull, and it was a bull I'd never seen. And then you look at the bull's progeny, and they're all young because he's young, but it's like, wow, I got to keep an eye on that bull. And they've got a heifer on their site that will knock your eyes out. Looks like the heifer looks like she'd be a Done Got Double Lucky daughter. She's absolutely gorgeous. I love that about the Hired Hand site. You can find that. And of course, you can go on your site and look at all the new ones and spend all your time looking at stuff.
What about social media? What do you feel like is your go-to social media if you're wanting to find animals?
The only thing I do is Facebook. You can make a career out of this mess, and if it's not your job, it can consume you and get a little out of control. Facebook. And really my Facebook page, William Suber, is only for my cattle. I don't show people what I'm eating. I don't say, look at these new flip-flops. Whoever does, great. That's fine. I don't do that. It's just for cattle. But it's gotten to the point where I'm constantly deleting amazingly irrelevant ads, and I'm a little frustrated with it. I hardly see what I really am there to see. So I don't know what to do about that.
Do you use Facebook to also market your own animals then?
Yeah, definitely. When we have something going in a sale, we'll make a post about it. And you got to kind of pick the time. Don't do it 3 months before the sale. I know some people are so excited when they get their ad back from the ad person. We have to show it right away. That's great. But you lose the impact of freshness when it's the sale's 5 or 6 days out, maybe 7 days out. You put the ad, it prompts people to go to the online catalog and study it. And I love that part. But yeah, Facebook's the only thing. Occasionally, if I see something funny, I might say something about it. But the main idea is the cattle. And there are all those groups too: Longhorn Friends, and Friends with Longhorn Cattle, and Texas Longhorn Futurities. Of course, your hired hand group, hired hand customers group. And you don't just put it in one. You don't just put it on your own thing. I constantly have to tell my buddies, you just put it in yours. You got to hit 5 more. Don't, if you want it to be seen, especially new people. That's the thing that I don't like about this deal. You come in, it's like high school. You come in as a freshman, you go out as a senior. Well, a freshman boy is probably not going to get asked to the prom by a junior or senior girl. You got to have something going on. And your animal better be something, or it's not going to get looked at. This blows my mind. Someone consigns a cow to a big name sale. When the Red McComb sale was going, for example, that sale, and I think now the Glendennings are having it, the Hill Country sale. But some friends of mine consigned this white cow. She couldn't have been more white, with no pedigree and no horn, and got mad when she brought $1,250. And I thought, I think you did well, considering what she was. You just have to look at what is out there doing well and try to emulate that, either just like it or your version of it. That's what we try to do. And I can proudly say now we have 7 90-inch cows and 1 100-inch cow that's a partner cow. And 80 used to be our goal. I've tried to have everything 80, but 80 is the old 65 now. Back in the day, 65 was a big deal. Joe Grady, when I first met him, this is interesting. He had Ann Gravitt, G&G owns a cow named Wiregrass Magnolia 9, ironically, that comes from that lineage that I was talking about. And I was at Joe's when she was 16 months old, and he said, I think I'm going to consign her to the Legacy. This was early days of Legacy. And she'd brought a bunch of money, and she's, 96 now. And if Joe Grady knew he was making 90-inch animals, he would be thrilled, because he lived this stuff.
Yeah, he really did. And when you went previously in the podcast, when you were just using his name, I was going to try to slide in there that his ranch was Wiregrass, because I feel like more people might know the Wiregrass in all the animal names than they would that, Mr. Grady's the one that was behind it. So,
yeah. I wish, if there's a message to new breeders, I wish people would study people's prefixes or suffixes and leave them to them, because they work hard. It would be weird if someone said Dauntless something on an animal, but people do it. Wiregrass was Joe's. Todd's is, the majority of the Tejas. Well, no, all the Tejas bulls were born and branded at Todd's ranch. All of the Texana cows, there were a few before him, but they were born and branded at Todd's ranch. Checks is Bob's thing. And it drives me nuts. I've wanted to write an article for the trails about it, but it just takes so much time to explain it well. Don't use people's suffix. People will put Checks because it's a Cowboy Tough son or grandson or daughter or granddaughter. don't do that. Leave it up to them. Now, the tough thing's a different story. That's not his deal, and people, the new people, they don't, a lot of them, I can tell they don't understand. There's a lot behind that, and time and money and work. I bet, well, Joe's been gone, God, a lot of years now. What, 8 or 9 or 10 years now, maybe? Nine maybe? And see, that's another thing. I love to find the older stuff that worked and pull it back around. I can tell about this. We have an interesting embryo in the tank, not placed, but it's from a farlap daughter, a bighorn farlap daughter. And she has coach on her bottom side, and we flushed her to unlimited. So we have the potential that's exciting to me. We have the potential for a heifer that has all of the greats of that time, coach, farlap, and unlimited in one female. That, I love stuff like that. And then come back around on her with our modern stuff, for example, like the Silent Plan bull, the Silent Iron Sun, or the Shaka Joe bull, or the Mike Davis Lano Luck bull. I love engineering. It's kind of become my crazy pastime.
I don't think you're crazy. I think a lot of folks are working on that just like you are.
Yeah, but if you knew more of the story, you would think I'm crazy.
Well, maybe a topic for another podcast then.
I can't wait to talk about that. I cannot talk about right now. And I say that because when you get an idea and it's a good idea, you need to keep it to yourself. Because if it's something you're going to work on, if it's not, give it away. But there are a lot of people that could take your idea and run with it faster than you can for certain reasons. And then your idea is not your idea anymore. True. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I feel like we learned a lot about your program, got a lot of great advice, and kind of be sitting on the edge of our seat for about 2 years from now. See what's coming down the path for your program.
Don't hold your breath, but thank you for having us. It's been nice.
Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.